My sister has autism. My family is not very good at watching her, so I was always the one who was stuck watching her. I say stuck because I'm her sister, her younger sister. I never got to live the life I wanted. I never got anything to go my way because my parents were always just worried about my autistic sister, which makes me sound like I'm greedy and I'm the bad guy for wanting some attention, but let me just give you a little bit of context because this story is not like the average. My mother, well, she hates me, and I'll tell you why. At this point of writing, my mother's texted me 12 times to come home for the past hour. Her texts go from guilt-tripping me, begging me to come home, to calling me selfish, ungrateful daughter who has done nothing but aggravated them. There were worse things that I don't really care to type here. I've simply read the gist from the notifications and delete them. When I refused to text back, my father called. He's usually calm, so I took the risk, but he sounded more hysterical than my mom, so I just immediately hung up. But let me give you some context about what I'm talking about first. I'm 18 years old with a 22-year-old sister, Ellie. It would have been great to have a big sister to rely on, but here's one thing. My sister's diagnosed with autism. Not that I can't ever trust her with anything, but ever since I was young, I was told to always care for my sister. It always felt like I'm the big sister instead. Well, it's not like I hate her. Sure, I used to resent having to include her in everything. Like, there was one time she made a scene with a friend's birthday party. And ever since, quote, we decided that we'll just avoid parties. But she's actually funny and I have a good time with her. I even grew protective of her. Whenever I hear people whispering and pointing towards her, I just say, and I quote, "Never looked at a beautiful girl before?" She would hold my hand and giggle whenever I say that. I like making her laugh with stupid jokes, and she responds with even sillier jokes than mine. Well, one day, I realized that even if I'm the one taking care of my older sister, it wasn't all bad. And family comes first, right? But it's different with my parents. I don't mind assisting Ellie everywhere, but it feels like they're treating me like a caregiver for my older sister. We're not exactly well off, so both of them need to go to work, which is fine. I'm not sure when it started, but as far as I can remember, my day would start with cooking and making sure that she eats. We'd go to school together, eat lunch together, then I'll take her to her therapist. If we can afford it at the time, and if not, afterwards we would just go home and I can cook whatever's left in the fridge, or I guess we could do takeout. My father leaves earlier than I wake up and arrives home a little later than 8 p.m. My mother's job schedule, well, it's kinda confusing. Like, I don't even know what she does, but sometimes she's away for weeks, then just comes back for a few days. When they're both home, we get to hang out together as a family sometimes. Even then, I'm still in charge of my older sister. Ellie gets really upset when I'm not around. I can't blame her. I'm the one who's always there with her. One of our biggest fights happened when I was around 11 years old. My mother accused me of poisoning Ellie against them. She was forcing Ellie to eat and she was making a big fuss because it was plated wrong or something. So she started making these tantrums, shouting that she hated our mother. Mom tried to calm her down until she just started crying herself. I got up and hugged my older sister and that worked. When my mom realized my sister liked me better, my mom threw a plate across the room. She slapped me and confronted me if I was feeding my older sister lies about her. Of course, I defended myself and told her no, but she said that she would not believe me. Nothing seemed to work, so I just said, I don't blame Ellie for not liking you. I'm more of a mother to her than you'll ever be. Well, she got hysterical and started shouting at me after that. I realized it was a low blow, and at that point in time, I started to panic. I glanced at Ellie and she was in the corner, stressed out and pulling her ears. I went to her and I hugged her. I don't remember if my mother was still shouting at that point, but soon after that my dad arrived. He looked at me and I just stared at him. Then he looked at my mother, who was now on the floor sobbing. He went to my mother, who was now saying something along the lines of, and I quote, "I'm a bad mother. I'm a bad mother." I felt a strong pang of guilt. It could have gone better, yes, sure, so we went straight to bed that night. No dinner. The next day, my mother talked to us as if nothing happened. My dad patted me on the shoulder and whispered, "Hey, chap, your mom forgives ya." I couldn't even think of anything. Inside of me, I just thought, what? That does not make sense. It wasn't my fault. I may have crossed the line, but what I've said was true. Even now, I keep thinking how I was still 11 at the time. I shouldn't have to be responsible for her emotions, and how the evening turned out then. We didn't have any big fights after that, though. However, my creeping intuition still told me that she still thinks I'm constantly poisoning my older sister against her. I try not to care, but honestly, I feel constantly hurt. Whenever she calls me, she would only ask about her, or whenever she brings home anything, it's always for her and never for me. I needed to keep reminding myself that Ellie is not the enemy. Ellie has nothing to do with this, that Ellie is not the cause of any of this. That one day my mother will forgive me. My saving grace from all that sad days is when Ellie holds my hand and tells me that she'll get better at being a big sister someday. She would offer to throw my mother's gifts for her, but I convinced her not to, as to avoid another fight. My dad, on the other hand, seems to have ruled Switzerland before. I know that he knows how my mother treats me. I know he sees it. I told him before, and he just told me that I need to be more understanding since my mother's trying to reconnect with Ellie. So, I did. At least for long years, I was my sister's second, which brings me to recent events that I'm about to tell you about. I'm in my senior year, and we're having a big field trip, right? I initially opted out because it would be for 5 days and 4 nights, an almost impossible feat with my current situation. I have 2 friends in class who know my situation. They convinced me to go since I'm 18 and I should be leaving the house very soon anyways. Well, it made me think, and I started wondering how long I would have to take care of my sister every single day. I looked up the dates, with the miraculous coincidence my mother and father would have days off that time. I won't even need to ask for money since I've saved up money from my allowance. But I was scared to even just propose the idea to them. I keep telling myself that I just have to try. I stayed up one night when I knew both of them would be home and told them. Well, they both went quiet for what seemed like could be hours. My mother broke the silence by saying, "No." But my father stopped her and said, "Let her go this time. It's been a while since she went on her own anywhere. It'd be good for us just to bond, with Ellie." That softened my mom's deathly stare, but she simply got up and walked away without saying another word. Not minding my mom's response, it was the happiest I've ever been, well, at least in a long time. Finally, a day without my sister. I felt a stab of guilt thinking that, but I think I also deserve a break, no? I broke the news to my friends and they were ecstatic. The night before the trip, I was stoked. I was writing down notes on Ellie's needs, which wasn't much to be honest. She was already pretty much independent and they only needed to make sure she kept stressors away and make sure that she actually eats her food. While packing my bag, my father entered my room and sat me down. He told me I need to pass on the school trip after all. It felt like the world stopped for a few seconds and I didn't know why. I remembered to breathe and then asked him, why? Your mother, she's anxious about taking care of Ellie on her own. Plus, we forgot that we have a vacation set in 2 days. It'd be a waste if we don't go. Well, it's also a waste if I don't go, Dad. Plus, it's the only thing I've ever asked for, please. His face looked genuinely sorry, but he put his hand on my shoulder and said,
Hey, it's final. Don't be difficult. We've been working tirelessly for you, including your education. You don't need the school trip.
I felt my heart sink, and tears welled up inside my eyes. It felt like my one chance to finally have a break and enjoy myself was being taken away from me. I think it's ridiculous that they can't give me this one single break. With me gone, it would be the best opportunity for them to actually bond with her. In between sobs, I tried to reason with my dad. I told them they could manage, and Ellie is already 20. It wouldn't even be too difficult. I already taught her everything she needs to know to survive on her own. They only needed to be there and check on her once in a while, but they still said no. I even tried my friend's tactic. I told them that if they gave me this, I would not ask for anything else. But Dad remained firm in his decision. Their vacation's just worth more money than my school trip, so it made sense for him. My mother knocked on the door and looked at us. She glared at me and motioned for Dad to go to her. My dad sighed, got up, and repeated,
Please don't be difficult.
Anger and frustration filled me, and for the first time in my life, I decided to stand up for myself. I told my father that I was going on that field trip, no matter what they said. I knew it would cause a lot of tension, but this is just one time. I already hyped myself up for the past month, and I was even planning stuff with Ellie, and what I was going to buy her as a treat. They ignored my plea and went to bed. As usual, it seems like my needs will just never go above anyone else's. Around 5 a.m. the next day, I readied myself for the school trip. I finally decided I'm going without telling anyone. I wrote them a note on the kitchen table explaining that I need this time for myself and that they would have to manage without me for just a few days. My heart was pounding and I felt guilty and scared, but somehow I think that if I don't do this, I won't ever get to do anything for myself anymore. I need to set a boundary. Ellie woke up when I was by the door. With all the commotion, I forgot to even check on her last night. She ran up to me and hugged me. Then I felt a lot better. I know she'll be fine. And that brings us to now. For the first hour, I only received a single short text from my mother, asking for my whereabouts. The texts became longer and more frequent as hours passed, with no response from my end. I guess they were expecting that I'd go back from their constant guilt tripping. I tried to remain strong, but I felt myself shake. I don't know if it's anger, frustration, sadness, or a combination of everything. My friend saw me in a shocked state and gave the teacher an excuse so I could stay back in the hotel. I urged them to go enjoy the day since I don't want my parents ruining other people's trip either. I tried calling Ellie to check on her, but her phone seems to be turned off. I'm so stressed out and I don't even know what to think. That's why I'm here, typing all of this out. I know that telling strangers this weird story won't help the situation, but I guess I'll be able to think better hearing other people's opinions. So, my question for you guys is, am I the a-hole for leaving my sister alone for a few days for my school trip? Update number 1. Wow. A lot of things have happened since my last update post. I haven't had the time to read the comments since everything was just so crazy, but I saw some support in there, so thank you and I mean it. Anyways, about an hour after my father's call, my mother sent me a text saying they'll leave the house and leave Ellie alone. Whatever happens to Ellie will be my fault because we, as a family, decided that I should skip my school trip the night before. Like, what? I'm so outraged. Are they actually going to blame me for leaving Ellie alone? I immediately texted back saying that I can't possibly go home right now. My mom responds that I could have answered their text and gone home the minute they texted me. Outrageous. So I start calling Ellie, but her phone is still turned off, so I'm getting extremely worried at this point. I know she could care for herself, but it would help if I could contact her. I don't even know if my parents actually left her, or it's just their scare tactic they're trying to pull. I stayed for one more day, and I joined the tour to keep my mind occupied. I texted my parents again. I won't be coming home, and that they were the ones who should go back. That's when my mother texted me, and I quote, "Don't be selfish. Your school trip is useless. You wouldn't even be able to go if not for us. Show some gratitude." Well, I got angry, so I just turned off my phone. Surprisingly, no one really asked about why I stayed back yesterday, so that was a relief. By late afternoon, I texted my mother where they were. She sent me a photo of the inside of an airport and told me she and father are going as planned to their trip. I asked her if they took Ellie with them, and she said no, and that they gave me time to come home, and now Ellie's safety is my responsibility. Seriously? Fine. You know what? They win. I packed my bags and told my teacher there was an emergency at my house and I needed to go right away. My plan was to take the first bus that arrives, which will be about a 12-hour travel. I don't have enough money to change my tickets or book another flight. The bus trip is the fastest and most economical way for me to do it. But my teacher would not let me, since it would be risky and she's in charge of keeping after me. In my head, I thought, oh, look at that, an adult who has more responsibility than my own parents. I tried explaining, hey, my sister is at home alone and she needs me, but my teacher would not budge. I did understand her side, and the fact that I was probably not explaining the whole situation well wasn't really helping. But I possibly can't just stay still. The only information I have are the excruciatingly frustrating text messages that my mom keeps sending once in a while. My teacher began asking about my parents, so I stayed quiet. I don't know if I should tell her, or even if I should. What should I say? I think she noticed how worried I was, so she hinted on calling the police. I immediately told her to avoid that at all costs. It'll just stress out Ellie even way more. Plus, even if my parents don't care for me, I can see that they care for Ellie. So, my teacher suggested something else, that I stay for the night and she'll book me my flight the next day. I told her I appreciate the offer, but I need to go. Then she said she'll call the police if I won't take her offer, so I sucked my teeth, and I guess I'll still arrive around the same time if I wait, so why not? I could not sleep that night. I wanted to call someone, like a neighbor, just to confirm that Ellie is okay, but I have no one. I've just been way too focused on proving that I can take care of Ellie. Without the help of anyone else, including my parents. But who am I kidding? Now I can only keep guessing and hoping that she's all right. The next day, I went to my teacher and found her talking to my friends. When they saw me, my teacher walked up to me and told me she'll keep me company at the airport and book my flight. She didn't ask me more questions on the way. I wondered if my friends told her my situation, so she stayed with me until we reached the passenger-only area. While waiting for the boarding of the plane, I've been imagining what was going to happen at home. My best guess is that my parents are home and they tricked me into going back, so I was just imagining all the hurtful things I could tell them. However, if they're actually gone and left Ellie alone, I don't know what I should do. So yeah, here I am again typing to you, kind and less kind strangers. Please, let me know what you would do. Update number 2. Hey, I saw some comments saying this sounds like a telenova. Well, let me take you in for more telenova happenings. The last time I posted here, I was waiting to board a plane. Things immediately got crazy when I turned on my phone after landing. I received 20 text messages at least, but this time it wasn't from my mother. Before I could start opening them, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was Ellie. She was saying something about our parents leaving, and my heart sank. Now I wish my parents were just baiting me to come home. Suddenly, a different voice was on the phone. He introduced himself as our neighbor. He said he heard Ellie making distress sounds for hours, since he didn't see my parents come back from yesterday. He went into our apartment just to check. I immediately hailed a taxi while he continued telling me how Ellie was mumbling some broken phone number. He figured it was a phone number that was for me, so he tried calling and texting. The call only got through when the phone landed. When I arrived in the apartment, relief washed over me as Ellie hugged me. I asked her if she's okay, and she nodded yes. The neighbor excused himself to go back to his home, and I thanked him profusely for everything that he's done. I wanted to know more, but for now I need to make sure my sister is actually okay. I looked at the kitchen and it was a mess. But Ellie did manage to make a meal, so we ate. You turned into a chef within 2 days, I see, Ellie. I'm the world's best burnt pancake chef, she joked back. We returned to banter and it felt good. That night, we received a knock on the door. He seemed surprised to see me as I went to see him. He introduced himself as our uncle and showed text messages from father telling him to come check on the house. He was told it was only going to be Ellie and did not expect me to be there. I gave him the gist of what happened and all he could say was,
As crazy as she sounds, it kind of makes sense.
So here's the most telenovela-like part of it all. He told me that our mother is not my biological mom. Apparently, my dad cheated on my mom because he was stressed with caring for Ellie. Their resolution was to throw the memory of the mistress into oblivion and just treat me as their own kid. When I proved to be a general, well-behaved child, they decided they would just dump the care of Ellie on me. After that, the family just avoided other family members with the excuse of wanting to move here to keep everything low-key. Somehow, it all started making sense to me. I was a child of shame. My dad's proof of sin. Now, I wonder if Dad is always neutral whenever I fight with Mom because he feels guilty from back then. Did they only accept me because I might be useful to them? Is that why I don't get anything for myself? But at the same time, it just did not make any sense. See, they can feel shame with that, but they don't feel shame about leaving Ellie alone and blackmailing me so I'd come home? It was a lot to take in, and I don't know what to do with the information. If I tell them, I know, then what? That night, I slept beside my sister. She cuddled me and patted on my head, and I realized she was very quiet while our uncle was explaining our parents' history. She hummed and softly whispered to me, I'll take care of you like a big sister. The next day, my uncle left the house. I had a few more weeks of school break, so both of us just stayed at home. I still don't know how to handle my parents the day they came home, but I decided whatever happens will happen. I was supposed to enjoy myself on the school trip, but now I'll enjoy myself with my sister. So after 5 days of being cooped up at home, semi-stressing if my parents are finally home, we had a girls' day out. My sister suggested we hang out in the museum, which was perfect because there were not a lot of people during the weekdays. In each portrait painting, we tried to imitate the subject, which caused bursts of laughter from the two of us. It was really a good day. Until we arrived home. My bags and lots of boxes were outside the apartment door. Confused, we ran inside the house and found my parents putting all my personal stuff in another box. So I asked them what's happening. My mother stood up straight and said, You can't be trusted anymore. You want to go on your own? Do your own thing so much? You can leave. Well, I was flabbergasted, but I went back home. You two are the ones who left her here alone, I said. My mother slapped me. We told you not to go on that school trip, but you just have to know better. You're complaining that you're forced to care for your sister? Well, we got a caretaker. Now go do whatever you want. So I looked at my dad, but he wouldn't even return my gaze. He quietly arranged my things in the box, and my sister went to my side and said, well, I'm gonna go with her. She then ran to her room. Mother was surprised and tried to stop her and said, no, you can't go anywhere. You're my daughter. But Ellie got away. Your daughter? And what about me? I asked point blank at her. This time, my father finally looked at me. My mother grunted and went after Ellie. I walked towards my father and helped him put my things in the box. I did not prepare a big speech, but I often imagined that I was going to tell him off for keeping my real mother a secret. I had a lot of things going on in my head. Definitely over the past few days. I wanted him to hurt. I wanted them to know that they were unfair. I wanted to make them feel like they were the worst parents ever. But it felt like it did not matter. My mom isn't my real mom, and I don't think she's ever changed how she treats me. Dad's my real dad, but he doesn't fight for me, and I don't think he ever will. Ellie is my sister, my best friend, but realistically, I can't do everything for her either. I technically haven't graduated, and I don't even have a job. I felt absolutely helpless. Where do I even go? To my uncle? I don't know anything about him. Should I try my other distant relatives? What if they knew I was born from a mistress and they hate me? I don't even know where they live. Even if I do, I don't even have enough money to go. So many things just run through my head. Should I beg them to forgive me and let me stay? That would be the safest for me, but do I really want to stay? Do I have a choice? I thought about asking my friends, but I didn't want to include them in this mess either. Dad, I looked back at him again. Do I really have to leave?
Your mother says you should.
And you? What do you think?
It doesn't matter, honey. She decides.
Well, what about me? I don't matter. Uncle told me.
Yeah, he told me he accidentally mentioned it.
Then what? Should I suffer because of what you did? Don't I matter?
She's the love of my life, honey.
I went silent. I think out of all the things they've told me, that one hurt the most. It wasn't even an insult to me, but the message was loud and clear. I won't ever be anybody's priority, not even my own father's. I hear footsteps, and I see both my sister and mother. My sister looked scared, and my mother looked angry. You poisoned her against me. She shouted. Before I could even react, she grabbed random things in the box and started throwing everything at me. My father pulled the box away from her and helped her until she stopped flailing. She started sobbing, saying, I'm such a bad mother. It was giving me stabs of painful flashbacks, so I started backing away. My sister shouted, Please don't go! And my mother cried even harder when she heard that, so I just ran away. I ended up going to my friend's house. Thankfully, her parents let me stay for the night. My dad texted my uncle's phone number. I messaged my uncle right away, and he had more news for me. He told me that after I ran away, my mother texted pretty much every living relative and told them I'm pretty much the spawn of Satan who ruins every relationship she's ever had, especially with her daughter. Some of our relatives were confused as to if I actually poisoned Ellie. It was such a ridiculous news to hear. Wasn't I supposed to be her daughter as well? She warned everyone to not let me live with them, as I would do the same to their families. My uncle offered a room for me in his place, and I agreed. He introduced me to his wife, and her first line to me was, Don't worry, we don't have any children for you to poison. They were good-hearted and funny, and it was great. My evil plans were posted on social media as well, but I soon realized that it didn't matter. I tried contacting Ellie, but it seems my phone number was blocked. I use my uncle's phone as a workaround, but the call is immediately dropped whenever I talk. Honestly, without having to care for my sister and without my constant fear of my parents, I felt great. Better than any other day ever. I felt bad for feeling that way. Part of me's judging myself for not doing enough to make contact with my sister. Another part of me comforts myself by saying that Ellie is loved. Well, though my parents' version of love isn't exactly healthy. They left her alone before. What stops them from doing the same again? It felt like I'm protecting myself and just myself for the first time in years. I feel displaced, but somehow at peace. I do constantly feel a hint of guilt and sometimes a huge wave of it whenever I imagine my sister. I miss her terribly, and I bet she misses me too. But I don't know. Not having to think of someone else for a while, even for just an hour, feels refreshing. My question is, should I feel like an a-hole for not fighting for my sister? I guess I'll leave the judgment to you guys. Okay, so I'll be honest with you guys. Even though OP was the affair baby, it did not matter. That does not give OP's mother an excuse to just ignore a child that has autism, which, by the way, was her biological daughter. Who would leave her alone in the house just to fend for herself, ultimately knowing that OP was not there? OP was on a much-deserved field trip, and if it wasn't for this concerned neighbor who came knocking on the door when the neighbor heard distress calls, who knows what would have happened to her? Guys, if you were in OP's very unique situation, let me know in the comment section down below. How would you have handled it? I don't know how I would have gone about it, but I would have been losing my marbles. And also, let me know what you think about the father of this story. I would love to hear from you guys about this topic. So, let's talk about it, guys. Hello, my name's Mr. Reddito if you're new to the channel. I animate and narrate stories every single day. If you're bored, want to hear a couple stories to pass some time, stop on by, see what we're doing today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a fantastic day, and remember, it's cool to be kind. A peace.